what use would fungi or fungi or fungi, depending on where in the world and how you want to pronounce it, and other death-regenerating entities have pre-curse? What use would they have? But I just want to show you very quickly. I've been studying fungus for many years and used to do huge surveys of them and used to collect samples as well. And I just thought, because it's just down here, I might as well show the group. One of the largest fungi fruiting bodies that I'd ever found.
Nice. Wow.
Pretty sizable thing. It's a Ganoderma australe, which literally means southern bracket. We call these bracket fungi in the UK. I think they're called shell fungus in the States. I don't know.
We call them snake. We call them snake bread in Australia.
Snake bread. There you go. So yeah, it's pretty sizable creature, and we're estimating about 14 years to get to this kind of size. Based on the growth pattern. So anyway, I just thought that'd be interesting to show the group. But Craig, over to you for the question.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing to consider. A fungi a part of God's original plan for food, and I'm not so sure that they necessarily were. Maybe for some creatures, because God said to all the creatures to go and eat all the green plants. So John or others might have a comment on that, but. Fungi are actually very important in the ecosystems for various purposes, including the breakdown of organic parts. So, you've got animals there eating the green plants. There's going to be branches and bits and pieces falling off all the time. And the fungi are essential for the cycling of those nutrients back through into the soils. Some fungi are actually essential, for example, in the eucalypts. They're called mycorrhizae. They are closely linked with the root systems. They seem to almost help the roots communicate with each other, actually, but also to help them gather nutrients for the plant. So, I think those two purposes are probably the two core purposes, rather than food. In Australia, we've just had a very major case of 3 people that have died at a dinner party from eating the wrong mushrooms. It was cooked up at a Sunday lunch, and one of them was actually, I think, a Baptist pastor that died as part of that, which was very sad. But that's why I raised the question as to whether fungi were actually part of the original sort of food sources.
Well, here in Australia, Craig, we have some remarkable relationships, particularly in the area that I like to specialise in, and that is food crops and orchids. Now, we have many orchids in Australia that, left to themselves, will not germinate their seeds anywhere above or below ground unless a fungus gets involved and actually helps break down the outside of the seed and germinate the plant. But it goes even further than that, because we have orchids that they were noticed always only within sort of 2 or 3 meters of the base of a tree. And the connection is, if you actually dug up the orchid, these are ground orchids, and you notice from the roots, there'd be fungal threads going right back to the tree. And then you notice there was a 2-way transmission. The tree would provide sugars and everything coming along the root into the orchid, and the fungus would take the waste away from the orchid and deliver it to the tree. And you think, man, that is pretty clever. One needs the other. So they're part of God's original A plus B plus C actually works by themselves. None of them work very well at all, and some of them won't work one bit. But here's where it can go wrong. Having been involved in crop control and things like that, fungus can get out of control because of either the switching off of something in the major plant that benefits from the fungus. So the fungus takes over and all the food is robbed by the fungus, and it fills up the inside of the plant until the plant is basically strangled, right? It can't survive at all. At the other extreme, we have some plants that have become so dependent on the fungus that we have orchids that flower underground. They never need the sun, but their connection is to the tree further over there, and that tree is getting plenty of sun. So it's providing all the materials, all the sugars underneath the ground to this plant, which at the best, it sort of just gets a few minerals from the environment, but it does not need the sun at all. It's become totally dependent, and all you would need would be one drought, kill off the trees, and that orchid is now extinct. So those are the two extremes of what can go wrong, where it can eliminate the tree or the plant because its balance gets out of control, or something becomes so dependent on it becomes absolutely fragile in its whole structure and can disappear in a single drought.
Yeah.
Yeah. I took the question to be more than just the fungi, that it's talking about the whole suite of microorganisms pre-flood. I think on day 3, when the soil appeared, it doesn't say created on day 3, it appeared, that the good soil has to have a whole population, a whole suite of microorganisms that work within the soil in conjunction with the plants for plants to thrive. But there would be living, dying microbial populations, making the nutrients available, holding the soil together. The soil is an ecosystem, but this isn't death in the sense of biblical death that we're talking about, because the death is in the blood. So this is different with microorganisms, bacteria and such, and we've talked about that in the past. That's what I
go to the Ask site or the Q&A site or the fact file and search death or search plants or search biome or some of those words, because most of us grow up in school, go to university, get a job somewhere, and find that we are dealing with only the fungus, right? We become experts in fungus instead of seeing, well, without the water, the tree doesn't grow. Without the tree, the fungus doesn't grow. Without the fungus, the tree doesn't grow.
And the bacteria.
So interconnected, which is why God made them all on day 3, right? The ground comes up, the plants are finished because they're built with that fungal connection all on that day.
Yeah.
And sometimes the fungus will kill the tree because of the upset post-fall world where everything's thrown out of balance. We have a problem in Australia with a fungus called Phytophthora that kills a lot of certain types of trees and bushes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was involved in one of the original research groups that looked into things like ash dieback. Ash is a very old and historic tree here in the UK, and a disease came from the continent, which was known as ash dieback, and it started to attack some of the ash trees. And it's got a 2-year cycle where it basically attacks the tree internally, and then the ash has like a long, thin midrib, and then little leaves that come off of it, and then the leaves and the midribs fall to the ground, and then the fruiting bodies come out of those midribs. They look like little tiny golf tees the next year. And I remember at the time that there was a huge amount of panic over this is going to be the end of ash trees in the UK. It's decimating the populations. Then it turns out that a tiny little proportion of ash trees were actually resistant, or rather they could cope with the fungus inhabiting them. And natural selection takes its course, as it does. And here we are getting on for 8 to 10 years later. This would have been about 2013, 14, something like that. So about 10 years later. And there are hardly any ash trees dying, because all the ones that have died or would die have died, and you're left with a new population which is now springing up that are actually resistant to it. So sometimes you have these things sweep through a population, which of course is all part of the curse as well. But all interesting stuff to look at.
Joe, our famous Wollemi pine has suffered this problem because it was found initially in a tiny little alcove growing in sandstone with a mild climate, and sandstone having very low nutrition and very specific biome that did not include any of the fungus you find in tropical Queensland. So when they actually learned to multiply it by using little segments of the tree and sort of transplanting all the segments. They grew thousands of them here in Queensland, and yet when you planted them out, the Phytophthora killed them straight away, almost within a very short period of time, and you watched your $1,000 investment just wither away. So we tried it 3 times at Jurassic Ark, and the bad news is, unless we leave them in pots with specially treated fungus-free soil, we are throwing money down the drain. Yet if I go and plant them in sandstone that's low in any of these fungus, they'll do well, right? So it's an interesting situation there that is really related to this question of fungal death.
Yeah.